Welcome to the Pacey Performance Podcast. Today, I'm speaking with High Performance Manager at Harris Ross Physiotherapy, Darren Roberts. Thanks for tuning in to the Pacey Performance Podcast. So today we have another part 2 with someone who's become a friend since the part 1, probably nearly 2 years ago now. So with Darren's experience with extreme sport athletes, with his time at Red Bull and his time now at Harris Ross, obviously didn't go for that topic, and we went for something completely different in coach health. So this was, as I mentioned in the episode, this was something that was brought up with Brett Bartholomew, probably back on episode 50. So Darren takes it on, and we chatted about another second podcast, and Darren put the topic of coach health to me, which I thought was really interesting. So if you are interested in that, this will be a really good episode. And there's such great recommendations from Darren, especially for the young aspiring coach, or just those that feel a little bit bogged down with industry or the kind of pressure that the nature of the job brings, really. So I really enjoyed chatting about this side of things. I don't think it's talked about enough, although there is certain proponents of this, of talking about this type of thing, and Darren's definitely one of them, so it was great to get him on and chat about this topic. So just before I get into the chat with Darren, we have a Sports Science Minute with the guys from Coach Me Plus, from Ethan at Coach Me Plus, just talking about missing Olympic lifts. So definitely not something we've spoke about before. We've spoke about Olympic lifts with a couple of guests, but not specifically missing them. So it's only 2 minutes, just a little snippet of really good information from Ethan just before the chat with Darren. So I hope you'll enjoy both, and I will speak to you soon.
In this Sports Science Minute, I want to have a quick discussion on how to miss weightlifting movements, the snatch, the clean and jerk, and the weightlifting derivatives. One thing I see, especially in new lifters, people who are beginning to train, is they don't know how to miss lifts, even something like a squat. And especially when you get into heavy weights, if you don't have racks with arms on them, or you don't have spotters, on the side or behind you spotting you, it's really important to miss lifts. And so part of coaching and teaching, especially with the weightlifting movements, is teaching them how to miss the lifts. So I was always taught that, if you catch a snatch and it's coming behind you, to throw it behind you, try to throw it behind you and jump forward. If you miss it in the front, you just dump it in the front. With a clean, if you miss a clean, hopefully you don't crash down on your knees with your elbows. I've seen some really ugly injuries with the wrist with that. So make sure that if you miss a clean and it is going out in front of you, that you try and dump it without injuring your wrists when your elbows hit your knees. With a jerk, if you miss it and it's going behind you, obviously you want to try and jump in front of the bar as fast as possible so the lift doesn't crash down on you. If you miss it forward, you want to try and dump it forward. With front squatting, obviously if you're coming up out of the bottom of a front squat and you can't finish the lift, you want to try and dump it forward and try and back away and jump away. And if you're missing a back squat, you want to try and dump it off your back and jump forward so it doesn't go down your spinal column. It's just a quick tip, but it's something that I feel is important, something that needs to be coached and just taught when you're doing the weightlifting movements as missing Olympic lifts. Hope this helps.
Thanks for tuning in to the Pacey Performance Podcast. So I'm slightly nervous. Firstly, because it's 7:20 and I'm half asleep. Secondly, because we are recording a new little piece of software that could go tits up at any point. And thirdly, because slightly nervous because we're doing it again and we're talking about coach health, which Darren came to me a couple of weeks ago and said, this is a topic we need to chat about. It was covered with Brett Bartholomew in Brett's first episode quite a while ago now. But just want to kind of touch on it again. And well, firstly, I want to welcome Darren to the podcast and just thank him for his time again for joining us, and just ask him to give us a little bit of background on maybe himself, and then secondly, why you feel this topic is so important to discuss again.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Thanks for asking us back on. And it's been a couple of years since the last podcast, which has flown by. And for those that don't know, I'm a high performance manager that's working specifically with extreme sports athletes. So that's what I'm known for. Working with that challenging athlete population group. This topic in particular, coach health and well-being, mental health and well-being. It's just, as you said, Brett Bartholomew touched on it in his podcast, which I listened to, and it was great, and it really struck a chord with me. And it's just something that's not talked about often enough, or engaged with often enough, and it really stuck with me. And the more I thought about it, there's a couple of other bits that I've seen since, which touch on this subject. And just in going through the day-to-day life of the job, I just felt it was something that it'd be good to do a podcast about, and maybe talk a little bit more in depth about it.
Mm-hmm. So, we'll go into a little bit more detail maybe later on about the Performance Forum and kind of why it was set up and things like that. But Performance Forum last night with coach health as the topic. And you'd mentioned previously that when we chatted off air that if it had been a slightly different subject, there may have been maybe more turn up and a bit more engagement. But why do you think it is that maybe people are, like you say, it is getting more out there and more people are talking about it, but it's still something that isn't talked about enough? And why is that?
I think there's a bunch of reasons that, what is coach mental health and well-being, and what are we even talking about when we're talking about that? It's I think the way that the job is, it's very easy to get sucked into a whole bunch of things without even realizing that it's happening, which for me is part of the problem. And everyone's just on that kind of, everyone's that mouse on that wheel, aren't they? Just going flat out on the wheel, trying to keep everything going, keep themselves going, keep the job going. That I think it's not necessarily something that everyone's massively aware of. And as a result of that, it's not necessarily something that's very front of mind. So, it's a really strange one. And for those that maybe are sort of have some awareness of some of the issues around being a coach, whether you're working in sport or whether you're training private clients, whatever your role as a practitioner is, I still think that even at a very, very sort of, low level, it's not cool to talk about. It's not cool to say you're struggling with certain things. It's not cool to say you've got this going on or you've got that going on, or you're being pushed in a certain direction. I think, and this isn't any sort of external stigma that's applied to it. I think it's just something that we put on ourselves, that it's just not talked about. It's just something that you to whatever degree you largely try and deal with yourself.
And this is one thing that Brett talked about in his, with regards to the kind of badge of honour, that, first in the facility on a morning, last out of the facility on an evening. And I spoke to Dean Riddle maybe last week, a little before, and he said it's very, very similar over there, that there's nothing to do, but people feel like they should be there just to be in and around the place and show that they're, I don't know, just there. And obviously he's traveling probably 4-hour commute, so he obviously wants to go home and see his family. but the staff and the staff there and probably everywhere feel like they should be there, and it's this thing that you need to have your face in there, and you need to be able to tell everyone that you're going to work at 6 o'clock in the morning and coming back at 7 o'clock at night. It's just a thing that has become a badge of honor. Yeah, and that's over here as well, 100%.
Yeah, of course it is, and we've all done that, and and this is all part of the reasons why we all get into this, because we're passionate about what we do, we care about what we do. Coaching. I think Brett even said this. Coaching is something that you are rather than just something that you do, and that sort of passion, enthusiasm, the love of the job is what. It's very easy to do something like that. It's not sustainable, but it's very easy to throw yourself into it like that. And then there's a whole raft of reasons around why perhaps you may feel like you need to do that, because of the way the industry, such as that word is, the industry. I'm not sure what that means, but such the way that the industry is set up, because there is no job security. It is low pay, the lack of opportunities. Your job tends to be your life. It's not something that you turn up at 8:30 in the morning, check in, and then you leave at 5:30 in the evening and don't think about it again. It's not that type of job when you're working as a practitioner with whoever you're working with. It's long, irregular hours, but that then sort of leads to this, like you say, this kind of badge of honor of, first in, last out, because you perhaps need to feel like you need to be seen to be doing that because of the lack of security and lack of opportunity. You may think that if you don't do it, someone else will do it. So you've got to be seen to be doing everything you can to work as hard as you can, to produce as much output as you can, to show that you're doing that. And I don't know if that makes much sense to anyone, but it's my own personal experience is no one's telling me to work 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. No one tells me to do that, and no one's told me to do that. But there was a period of time when that is what I was doing, and that was just a pressure that I put on myself to be doing anything and everything as often as possible, and to be seen to be doing that.
So it's that kind of, for me, definitely coming from a personal point of view, it's that love of what you do which creates the kind of overwhelming pressure that you put on yourself. And again, coming from a personal point of view, that I felt that overwhelmed to firstly be doing what we just said, in the gym early, leaving late at night for not much money and lack of security, but also when you get home and the feel of the need to, you go on Twitter, you go on Facebook, there's papers there, obviously research papers that you feel like you have to read because you see that, well, he's shared that, which means he's read it, which means he's one up on me, which means I have to read it. And then, like a lot of coaches, they're doing other education, whether it be, I don't know, EXOS certificate or online certification or a master's or something, and all of a sudden you go you're in work early, you leave work late. When you get home, you're having some dinner if you're lucky, and then you feel like you have to be reading papers, Skyping someone in another country to feel like you're learning something, and it all just becomes very, very overwhelming. And from my personal point of view, it got just totally out of hand, really. And I can imagine that if it's happening to me, I'm guessing it's happening to other people. So yeah, I came to a situation where I was thinking about my lifestyle, and I've said this to you before, and other people as well. I got to a point where I was thinking, okay, what lifestyle do I want? And trying to fit the job around the lifestyle rather than trying to fit the lifestyle around the job. So by that, I mean, do I want to work until 9 o'clock at night? No. Do I want to work on a Sunday? No. So something has to change somewhere. I'm not just going to accept that this isn't the norm. Can I do this till I'm 50 years old, 55 years old, 60 years old? Because we know we're going to be working. So that's the decision I came to. I decided to change some things and left a job to get another job, which was slightly kind of left field for what I thought I wanted to do, but it created the lifestyle that I wanted. And I think, and we'll go on to the UKSCA thing in a minute with the state of the industry, but that's one thing that worried me is based off them stats the UKSCA presented. How many good guys are we losing along the way because of all the things you mentioned? No job security, little recognition often, inability to switch off. It just gets too much.
It does, and you've touched on a bunch of stuff there. And, it's the inability to switch off. So this enthusiasm, this care, this passion for the job, for what you're doing, for the opportunity that you've got with whoever you've got it with, however long you've been doing it, it then the more you throw yourself into it, it's this, as I say, it's this must do more kind of mentality that it's easy to get. But then you start getting into, like I say, your job is your life, and the more you throw yourself into it, it's you mentioned social media there. So social media does a lot more good than harm, but it's what I call this constant connectivity. And because the good thing about social media or any social media channel is it gives everyone a platform and everyone a voice to put forward their ideas and put themselves forward. But also, one of the bad things about social media is that it gives everyone a voice, So what's good about it can also be what's bad about it, which I know is kind of weird because we're doing a podcast that's going to be put out through Twitter and the other social media channels, So but it then further drives you to make sure that you're part of that story as well, that you have a voice as well, and that you're seen to be doing certain things. I think. And the constant connectivity isn't just about, being active on social media. It's a way to stay connected to everyone in your network. It's a way to stay connected potentially with the people that you're working with. So whether that's through some kind of message media or whatever it is, but having that mobile device in your hand, that's work. You're working, and it's so easy just to be walking along. It's a Saturday. You're with friends, family, partners, girlfriends, wives, husbands, whatever, and you just get your phone. I'll just have a quick look, and you just scrolling through. Well, you're working. You're connected back to work. This isn't switching off. This isn't getting away from anything. This is just, and it's a constant thing, isn't it? And we all do it, me certainly, and it's just so easily done wherever you are, whoever you're with, just to get that, whatever mobile device it is you're on, just to sort of get it out and just have a quick look on, the various different things, who's doing what, see what the athletes are up to. And you're working, you've not switched off. And then without realizing it, because you're not getting away from work, you're not having downtime. I think it just adds to the stress. It just adds to the feeling of not having time. I don't have time. How many times do we say that? I don't have time. And similarly to you, it got to the point with me where again, this is pressure that I put on myself. No one's telling me to do any of this stuff. It's just me applying it to myself. That it's not sustainable, that you can't do, as I say, these 14-hour days, 6 days a week. You can't be up at 10 o'clock at night doing this, that, and the next thing when it could be done in the morning. But the kind of people that we all are, in my experience, is we're not the sort of people to go, I'll do that in the morning. It's like we go. We get things done. We smash things out of the park. That's the kind of people that we are. So when something comes in, you want to deal with it there and then, regardless of the time of day or where you are or who you're with. You don't want to leave it until a more appropriate time. Well, I say that, and I'm talking about myself. And all of these things, they just layer and layer on and layer on and layer on. And before you know it, your home life's suffering, you're suffering, you're not training, you're not looking after yourself, you're not spending quality time with friends, families, partners. You're eating a poor diet, and this just adds to the stress. Must do more, must stay on top of everything. And it was there's a great article online about Urban Meyer, who's a college coach out in the US, and he used the term lone wolf, and that's something that I talk about. Was that feeling of being on your own, and I don't mean in some really kind of, what do I mean by that feeling of alone? I don't mean, sort of sat in a corner, rocking backwards and forwards on your own. I mean that feeling of no one understands what you're going through. You don't have time. You can't really explain it to anyone. No one really understands the pressures that you're under, which may well be external pressures. In my case, it was just pressure that I was putting myself under. And that just feeling of not necessarily having anyone to offload to, because we want to deal with these things ourselves. So just being that lone wolf, cracking on, doing all this stuff, and it will lead to a feeling of isolation, and it will just add and add and add to the pressure, and that's across the coaching spectrum. I'm not talking about whether you're a performance director of a national governing body, which brings its own pressures, to the young coach that's just finished their MSc and is trying to get a job. I think it's across the whole coaching spectrum.
And then that brings us back onto the performance forum. So we'd both, probably you more than I, had been to I think it was annual, maybe I don't know, twice yearly thing at Yorkshire Cricket that was Dean Riddle again and Tom Summers, who set that up and just brought everyone together and had a few speakers, had crate loads of Red Bull, loads of the coffee, and a couple of speakers, and everyone just got together and kind of, I think that obviously the aim of that was to get away from this lone wolf style existence and just get in a room and just be with people who are in a similar position to you. And then obviously when Tom left and went abroad, and obviously Dean's been long gone, I messaged you, and you obviously had a very similar thought to me with regards to setting up something like this. So do you think the performance forum, I mean, I think it's brilliant, and I missed it last night because of a new job, but I think it's valuable that people do that kind of thing. It doesn't have to be a formal thing. It's just getting together with like-minded people, and I mean, it's a bit gay, like sharing and growing, but it does actually do that. It does actually do that, and it gets you out of your own gym and just gets you speaking to like-minded people about things like this and just sharing frustrations and how people deal with it.
Of course it does. It's like you say, the Riddler and Tom, they used to have this, like you said, this little gathering over in Yorkshire, and it was no harm, no foul. It was just people coming and sharing stuff, and then obviously they both moved on. And as you say, you messaged me and said, "Oh, they were really good, weren't they? We should start that again." So and then you proceeded to let me do all the work, obviously, but and organise everything. But I guess without realising it, in the back of my mind, it was going to something that wasn't necessarily a formal conference where you're being presented to formally for a number of hours in the day. As we all know, any conference that we go to, no matter how good the conference is, you can't beat the coffee chats in between, can you? The viral connections. It's always those chats in the breaks where you sometimes you feel like you get quite a lot of value, these off the cuff conversations. And essentially, I guess for you and for me and for others, it was that inter-presentation, coffee break, just to sort of expand that into that is what it is. And probably at a subconscious level, that's probably what we were crying out for. And that's what it is, and that's what it was, and that's what it still is. And I think that's why it's worked, because yes, a specific question will be answered on the night, with not opposing sides, I don't mean it like that, but one point of view, and then someone will talk about it from a completely different point of view, and we all chat about it. But I think that's why is everybody wants to collaborate and everybody wants to share, but it's very difficult to do so because obviously, it's hard to share because in terms of what you're doing and how you're doing it, everyone's trying to keep their job and, maintain competitive advantage and be careful about how much they do share and who they share it with. But the performance forums have been popular, I think, for that reason, because you're not a lone wolf. There's other people in the similar line of work, and I'm not talking about whether you work with athletes or whether you don't work with athletes, but you are a coach practitioner, let's say, that is delivering to X population, whether that's world-class athlete sporting population or general population, which all have their own challenges. And, it's being able to chat to people in the similar line of work that are going through similar things. And, and that's the thing, it's all about the similarities rather than the differences. And collaborating and sharing in that way is one of the key, let's say, coping strategies that I have is to maintain that network and contact with a network and be with other people and chat to them, whether it's about full-on professional, well, I'm doing this specific thing with this specific athlete or whatever, to just sort of generally chewing the fat. It's vital to do things like that, so you're not this lone wolf, that you're not just feeling like you're out there isolated on a limb. No one understands, what you're having to go through, the pressures that you may well be under. And I guess that's why we did it, and that's why it worked. But there's a whole bunch of things that me personally I put into place to sort of try and manage what I'm doing and manage myself, just as you would an athlete, because we probably look after, I think, well, again, speaking for me, looking after the people that I work with a lot better than I was looking after myself. It's Howard Green would say, we plan and periodize for our athletes and down weeks and recovery time and all of this, but when do we do that for ourselves? And Brett, touched on it about himself, about what does he want his legacy be? What does he want to do? And it's be good at his job, but be a good person as well. And it was some of the conclusions that I had to come to as well. What do I want to do? I want to be a good husband. I want to be a good father. I want to, do this, do that. It can't all be work. But it's very easy for it to be like that, though. And there's no one there to tell you any different. And there's no one there to say, you're probably overworking a bit there, or you don't have to do that right now. It's appropriate. You can do it tomorrow morning. Nothing's gonna. It is fine. It doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you're doing a bad job. It's actually all right. You just get on with it yourself.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just writing something down there, but and one thing two things that for me about coping with this type of thing is identifying the people who are in a similar boat to you and you can really relate to and kind of build not a superficial gay S&C industry relationship with, but an actual friend. And through the podcast really and social media and going around and seeing these guys, I've got a couple of them people who you can kind of lean on, and you're very in a very similar position. That's really helped me. And like I say, not this superficial, like we're Twitter friends kind of gayness, but an actual someone that you can communicate with. And secondly, going back to the learning, with the pressure of reading journals, reading books, etc., and not only periodizing your kind of downtime, but periodizing your learning. And I've mentioned this a few times. I think people think I'm going fucking nuts, but that was the pressure that I felt, was jumping from one thing to the next because this is the latest thing, that's the latest thing, and you just get overwhelmed. And one thing that helped me was to identify where there was a gap in my knowledge, whether it was I don't know, velocity-based training was the thing that everyone was talking about. I don't know enough about that. So for the next 2 weeks, that is the only thing I'm reading on a night, or every other night, or whatever it may be, and nothing else matters. Whereas previous to that, it was just a whole bunch of stuff that was just been read because I felt I had to read it, because other people were reading it, and nothing was actually sticking. So they're definitely two things that that helped me. But and just another thing actually was, I don't know if you've been through this with your girlfriend or your wife. Turn your phones off. Can you turn your phone off? You're always on your phone. I said that to her. She said that to me. I get pissed off when she's on it. She gets pissed off when I'm on it. And maybe putting, like we've tried loads of stuff, like putting phones in drawers at certain times. And you just think, oh my God,
I'll just check.
What is happening?
Just, she goes to the toilet or goes into, just walks out of the room for a second. You just stood there and go, I'll just have a quick look. And you, like I say, the connectivity, you're working.
It's incredible. Honestly, we were watching a film the other night and I was like, I've just got to go to the toilet. And then went to the toilet and I'm sat, without even knowing, sat on the stairs outside the living room on my phone. And she's shouting, what are you doing? Oh, nothing. I'm just going down the stairs.
Yeah.
Like, she knows on my phone. And I go in and she's on her phone. Like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah. It's so easily done. And ultimately, that connectivity is part of 21st century life, isn't it? I've got an 11-year-old daughter. She's got her phone. She's in touch with her friends. She gets home from school. She's on her phone. So we all do it. But I think there's a difference between doing it. I'm no sports psychologist or social scientist, but there's a difference between doing it sort of socially, staying in touch with friends and everything else maybe. But for us, it's work. And we don't realise it's work, and that's all part of not switching off. That's all part of not disconnecting from work, and that's also part of not being present with who you're with in the situation, with whether whatever that is. And it's just so easy. It's just so easily done. But again, it's having that disconnection. It's one of the sort of strategies that minor strategies that I've had to put in place, because obviously my athletes, are very active on social media, and that is how I keep in touch with them. That is how I keep sort of track of what they're up to and where. They will post on social media that they've just thrown themselves down a mountain and injured themselves. Then they'll let me know. It'll be on social media before I find out. So that is kind of how I find stuff out. But that's fine. But that doesn't mean I have to be on it all day, every day, all night, every night. And as I keep saying, no one's telling me to do this stuff. It's just pressure that you put on yourself to do it, to do these things. But there's a whole bunch of things that I ended up having to put into place to sort of manage myself way better, and ultimately no different to what you would do with someone that you're working with. And I know I'm repeating myself, but that is what we do. We tend to put all these plans and strategies in place for the people that we're working with, but do we really apply them to ourselves? If we were coaching ourselves, what would we say to ourselves? We'd say, well, you finished work there. I mean, just put your phone down. This is your deload, and what you got planned for this weekend. What you got planned for this evening. Where's the down week? Where's the downtime? Where's the recovery? When you're going to train yourself? When you're going to have time for yourself? Quality time for yourself. We'd say all these things, wouldn't we, if we were coaching ourselves? But when you're living it, eating it, and breathing it, it's very, very difficult to see that, and it's very difficult to do that.
Just going to take a very quick break in the episode with Darren. So in the second half of the podcast, we talk about the UKSCA State of the Nation, State of the Industry survey that was published at the UKSCA conference a couple of weeks ago. But just before we get into that, very quick thank you to Vald Performance, makers of the Nordboard, and they also have a second product coming out that the guys at the UKSCA may have trialed and seen the prototype. So keep in touch with what them guys have got going on, and just massive thanks to them for their continued support of the podcast. Definitely check them out at valdperformance.com. Again, massive thanks to Coach Me Plus for providing the Sports Science Minute at the start, and massive thanks to Ethan for doing that for us. So into the second half of the podcast with Darren. Hope you enjoy, and I'll speak to you soon. I just wanted to frame all the things that we just spoke to in the last half hour about with the UKSCA information that I mentioned right at the start, and we can jump off that and maybe give some thoughts on kind of recommendations and things like that for maybe the younger coaches or interns or something. So experience and income. This was the State of the Nation survey that was done by the UKSCA. I believe there was around 500 respondents, and it was presented at the UKSCA. So 0 to 2 years experience, 54% are unpaid. 33% are under £20,000. Just to let everyone know who's not in the UK, I think the average UK salary is about £27,500.
Which for the current exchange rate is probably about 5 pence of the currencies at the minute anyway. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. 3 to 5 years experience, 40% are under £20,000 and 16% are still unpaid. And the cracker for me is 6 to 10 years experience. So that's 8% unpaid, 25% under £20,000 and 29% under £30,000. So that's well over 50% of 6 to 10 people with 6 to 10 years experience under £30,000. And as a bit of a summary, 22% of S&C coaches are unpaid. A third of S&C coaches are paid less than £20,000. So that just kind of frames it. And then education for the respondents, a huge percentage have obviously got undergraduate degrees, and 35% have got MSCs. So yeah, that kind of just puts into perspective all the things that we've just been talking about and why these things are occurring. But on the back of that, for people who are new grads or interns or just get on the ladder or want to, obviously dying to get into professional sport or get into the industry, again, industry, not quite sure what that means. What advice would you give these guys to be able to cope with all that nonsense?
Well, first of all, those figures they're just depressing, aren't they? It's just absolutely depressing. And, I'm 44 tomorrow, by the way, Rob. And obviously you've sent me a card, haven't you? And of course you have. And so when I started, I didn't work for free. If you'd have said to me 20 years ago, mate, you need to work for free for a year or 3, I'd be like, what the actual fuck are you talking about? Why do I have to work for free? You mental. So, but that is where we're at right now. And equally, I was a PT. I started out as a personal trainer, and that was completely normal and acceptable. Why wouldn't I do that? Because, I'm earning money. Why wouldn't I want to earn money? So I've come into this in a completely different route, and I didn't go to university. I haven't got a degree. I haven't got a master's degree. But, the other thing I'd say as well, that I see a lot more people with PhDs now than when I first started. When I first started in this job, I'd come across people with degrees. I'd be like, oh, yeah, you've done a degree at university. That's awesome. And a few had done masters. I was like, wow, you've then gone on to do a master's. Well, everyone does a master's now. The PhDs become the new masters because, again, it's that extra level that people, sort of route that they go down. And as I say, I come across a lot more people with PhDs now than I did a long time ago. But yeah, those figures are just absolutely depressing, aren't they? And we spoke about this last night a little bit. Is the other side of that coin is there's lots of people trying to do, everyone's trying to do the best they can with the tools and resources and education they have available to them, and that's the reality. And it's not that someone's, a head of department isn't sat on a massive pile of cash and thinks, well, we should pay this intern, but I'm not going to. Everyone's just doing what they can with the budgets that they have available to them. So it's whoever sets the budgets, it's wherever the money's coming from, isn't it? And that's not necessarily the head of department who's taking on an intern or taking on a new S&C coach. Everyone's doing the best they can. And equally, I forget how old I am.
44 tomorrow.
Yeah. Mate, my knees. So I'm in that, this is completely off topic. So I am fully in that situation where, you used to refer to your knees, your elbows, your wrists, and, your back. I now fully refer to them to the good elbow, the good knee, the good part of my back. Mate, honestly. Anyway, but if you look at those stats that you just said there, then you're probably looking at, maybe a number one or even a head of department who's come through, let's call it this system of being unpaid and sort of having to earn your way to get into the job that you need to get into. So it just normalizes it for everyone, doesn't it?
The cycle continues.
Yeah, the cycle, because, and it's not that the person going, well, we should pay them, but I can't be bothered. It's like, that's just what happens now. If you've been doing, if you started out 6 years ago, maybe even longer, unpaid, that's just the way, that's just the route to market, let's say, for you. So no one knows any better. Then it just continues the cycle. But, I know lots of people, obviously, that work in sport or other organisations, and I know how tight money is, and everyone's doing the best they can. It doesn't make it any better. It doesn't make it any more right. It's just really, really sad, tragic. And what does that do to you as self-esteem, as a practitioner? That you don't get paid for what you do. That's that devaluing, that all those little knocks to your self-esteem. You're working all the hours, you're not getting paid. What effect does that have on someone? And when you're a young single thruster, you probably don't realise what effect it's having on you, maybe. But it's a real shame. It's a real shame, and I'd be fascinated to know how that works in the US, how that works in Australia. Is it a similar situation? Is it very dissimilar? Because it might not be. If it is dissimilar, if it isn't the same, then what are they doing differently to what we're doing in the UK? I'd be fascinated to know that as well.
Mm-hmm. But when it comes to, obviously, from that, you're saying that people should get out and just earn some money doing PTing, which...
Well, it's a completely credible thing to do. It's you don't have to work in sport, and anyone that's come to see me or come to speak to me, it's the first thing I say to them is, look, you don't have to work in sport. You don't have to go and work with a team. It's do you want to work in sport or with sport? Do you want to work, inside an organisation, or because the two different things? There's nothing stopping you from working with sport, with athletes, with an athlete population group, regardless of the level. It doesn't mean you have to be inside it. You can work as a PT, you can earn money. There's the independent strength and conditioning facility, let's call it, is something that didn't exist 10 years ago. Whereas now there are independent facilities all over the place with rigs and lifting platforms, decent facilities. And CrossFit's played its part in that, in creating these places where you can go and do independent S&C work. And that's a good thing. That's a brilliant thing. They just didn't exist 10 years ago. And it's a completely credible option as far as I'm concerned to do that, because you're earning money, you're coaching, you're working, you're refining your skills in terms of delivery. General population, they have their own idiosyncrasies as a group to work with in terms of how you train them and how you coach them, and you're just refining and expanding your skill set whilst earning money. And that just provides you then with a platform to attract an athlete or two or more, or an organisation to you that you work with on a consultancy basis. It's a completely credible thing to do, and I wish more would do it. And it's something that I tell anyone that knows me, any PT, that I always say to them, you keep doing what you're doing, attract athletes to you. You don't have to kill yourself to go and work with a specific team or sport. And frankly, there aren't the opportunities there anyway. So what are you going to do in the meantime whilst this job that you think exists sort of materialises?
Well, obviously I spoke to Rick Moylan, who obviously you know really well.
Yeah, Rick
who's doing exactly that. He's got obviously Scott and Liam and no doubt a number of other high-profile athletes that he's working with, but he's working with general population. And anyone that's interested, listen to that episode because it's really good about PTing. But also, Lachlan's mentioned it. What impact PTing has had on his career, obviously, and has progressed to the Giants in AFL. And then Keir, obviously another one who was talked about his kind of grind in the first years at Wasps, doing PT on a night just to get cash. And I'm sure he would echo what you've been saying about how it molds you as a coach, as a person, to be able to stand next to Maureen, the 60-year-old woman who, you know what I mean, that kind of population, to be able to just communicate. And it's not just, it is about getting money. Yeah, of course it is. It allows you to do that. But it exposes you to another population and it gives you a challenge to be able to communicate with these guys and get these people to do what you want them to do. Because at the end of the day, that's what matters, whether you're working with Maureen or you're working with the Giants. Just getting the person you're working with to do what you want them to, what you want to do.
Helping people, you know, and it baffles me why you know more don't do it. And I think again it's you know, it's maybe PTs themselves, you know, putting pressure on themselves that what they're doing isn't credible or valuable, that really to have that credibility, you've got to be, you know, fully working in professional sport. And that's a pressure that they put on themselves. But like you say, it's not just me that has this message. You know, I've heard it over and over again from many people is, I mean, that's what Brett does over in the, you know, he's in an independent facility. And that's exactly what he does. He works with, you know, across the spectrum, and that's brilliant, you know, and that's something that we all need to think about. I do, you know, it's 90% of what I do is with action sport athletes, but you know, they are the odd person that comes through who, you know, is just a really keen mountain biker or snowboarder, and we do stuff with them. But it's totally the way forward as far as I'm concerned. And I just wish more people would recognise that and you know, pursue that avenue and build up that business in that way, without thinking that the only way to be credible, the only way to sort of really set myself apart is if I only work with athletes, because you know there's a whole bunch of people that need help in a whole bunch of situations.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to round up, but is there anything else that you think would be valuable to the listener?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously, you know, yeah, well, it's just probably it's worth saying, look, you know, for me, I'm no sports psychologist, you know, I'm no NLP practitioner or anything like that. Only speaking from personal experiences is how I go about managing myself. And, you know, and for me, I've done this job for a long time. It took me a long time to get to this point to sort of recognise how I was essentially driving myself into the ground, which was myself doing it, as I keep saying. And, you know, it's anyone else that's listening to this in any other job, I'm sure, you know, they've all got this, you know, maybe doing a better job of looking after themselves, but it probably all seems like really, really obvious stuff. But you've got to switch off. You must switch off from work. Constant connectivity. It's great to have a voice. It's great to be connected to people, but you must switch off, and part of that is just getting off your phone or whatever, you know. Be with who you are in that moment and that time in that day. Quality time with yourself, family, friends. You know, quality time with yourself can be, you know, it's whatever you want it to be, but it is not keeping track of who you're working with, is it? That's not quality time. That's working. Quality time away from work with yourself, with family, friends, girlfriends, husbands, boyfriends, whatever. Like I already said, connectivity is working. what do you want your legacy to be? You know, and that's the question I asked myself. That's what Brett mentioned. What do you want your legacy to be? Because, you know, at the end of your life, no one's going to say, that was an awesome conditioning session you delivered 20 years ago, wasn't it? It's like, that's not what it's going to be about, is it? What do you want your legacy to be? There's a great book called The Art of Not Giving a Fuck, which was a recommendation of yours, actually, Rob. So you are quite useful when you want to be. Yeah. That's
a few people have read that and buzzed off it.
It's a brilliant book, and it's The Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And you know, in that, you know, she talks about managing your fuck budget, and because you just can't keep giving them out. You can't keep giving them out, right? You've only got so many to give in a day, so you have to manage your fuck budget. And just because you don't give a fuck about something doesn't mean you don't care. Doesn't mean you're not bothered. It's just you're just not wasting fucks left, right, and centre, are you? So I do a terrible job of managing my fuck budget. My wife's a trainer; she does a way better job than me. But I'm still working on that. You need to train, and that sounds painfully obvious, but you've got to train. You need to eat well. And just because you take time off from what you're doing, it doesn't mean you're doing a bad job, and it doesn't mean that someone's going to steal yours. Share and grow. Don't be a lone wolf. You know, connect to people, collaborate with people, work with other people, meet up with other people in a similar line of work with you, and just share ideas, chew the fat, you know, slag things off, get on your soapbox, you know, all the things that really we should do, but it's very hard to because of the nature of the job that we're in. And, you know, as I said, I'm sure there's sports psychologists and, you know, other people a lot better at this than me who that's all glaringly obvious to, but it's just managing yourself like you would manage one of the athletes that you work with or people that you work with, and just planning and that time for yourself and investing in yourself.
And I would encourage anyone to get that book, but it's funny as hell on audiobook when you've got the bird on there reading this back just saying fuck every other word.
Yeah. Manage your fuck budget. So, I mean, that's it. I don't know if this is going to be useful to anyone. It's not, you know, obviously it's not cool, and like, you know, it's maybe not the sort of podcast someone would expect from me, given that the athletes that I work with and what I do and everything else. But I don't know. I think it's definitely worth talking about, and I hope someone gets some use from it. I hope it resonates with some people. And yeah, it just, as you and I mentioned before, we've both spoken about this at length, and it just seemed to make sense.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. So where can people find out what you've got going on or not got going on because you don't have your phone in your hand?
Well, this is you can follow me on Twitter, but obviously not when you are switching off or having quality time with yourself or friends and family. So, look, the best way to see what I'm up to is on Twitter. I'm not massively active on Instagram, but I am on Twitter, The Real Conehead. I am on Instagram as well, which is also The Real Conehead. And you'll see what I'm up to and who I'm up to with and where at and all the rest of it. There's one more thing I just actually wanted to add to that as well is part of that sharing and growing. Maybe that is getting a coach mentor, regardless of the level that you're at. You know, I have a mentor that I work with called Gary Grinham that no one will have heard of, but you know, it doesn't matter what level you're at. I think whether you're starting out or perceived to be at the top of your game, I think we all could do with a bit of mentoring, which is an extension to the not being a lone wolf and just sort of meeting up and chewing the fat with someone. Or maybe it's the same thing, but as I say, you know, having that mentor. And the other thing as well is I've got a mentorship student at the moment, and that's been brilliant. It's been absolutely brilliant. I've had students on placement from university and stuff, and other people come and spend time, but to actually have a bespoke someone that I'm mentoring, it really keeps you honest, and really you learn a lot more than you realise you're going to learn, because you really reflect on what you're doing and why. And that's been a massive help actually. Is taking someone on in a mentorship role myself has been key to helping me.
Nice. Well,
not you, Rob. Obviously, you're a lost cause, but you know, it's
I'm gone. Yeah,
gone. I just thought I'd mention that.
No, definitely, mate. Well, thanks for your time. And
no worries.
I'm unfortunately have to get to work. But
yeah, I've got to get my daughter's sat staring at me. She's about to do a massive flying chop kick into my throat because we should have set off 10 minutes to go to school. So she's flipping out right now.
Not that anyone needs to know this, but I'm going to ask you to leave your internet on so that the file can download. Let's press stop recording. Like I said, this could go to shit. So this is the
none of this has been recorded. We'll be doing we'll doing this again tomorrow night, no doubt.
Okay, no.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to let you go and take her to school.
Yeah.
But thanks a lot for your time, mate. Appreciate that.
Nice.
Leave your internet on.
Cheers, buddy. Take it easy. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Pacey Performance Podcast and tuning in to listen to Darren speak about a very interesting subject and definitely something that should be talked about more, but I think is on the rise and talked about more, especially with the guys that I'm speaking to maybe on the podcast and who are putting it out on social media. So again, huge thanks to Val Performance and Coach Me Plus for sponsoring the episode today. Got a couple of really interesting guests coming up over the next couple of weeks and going down a route that I maybe haven't gone down before with one in particular guest that will be appearing. So keep tuning into the podcast. Thanks again for your support, and I will speak to you in the next episode.